Hey guys, welcome back to Total Tactics FPL. Today I'm actually going to look at a new video which is going to be preseason hidden gems. I'm going to be looking at specifically assets with less than 5% ownership, maybe coming from some of these mid-table teams, and looking at the opportunities for us to actually incorporate some of those players into our teams. And I'm going to be looking at specifically players who have less than 5% ownership, so therefore a slight deviation from what I would argue to be is the template. The first option is going to be Danny Ward from Leicester, and he is a 4.0 goalkeeper that you definitely want to actually include into your team immediately. He could be this season's Tsimikas, and what's so great about him is he presents the opportunity for you to actually rotate keepers. A lot of us have been going for players like Ederson or even Alisson, going for some of those 5.0 keepers such as Ramsey or Mendy or Sa, but now you have the opportunity to maybe think about going for Danny Ward as one of your keepers as the 4.0 option, and then pairing that up with another 4.5 keeper. So this is a great opportunity to maybe look at some of Leicester's defensive fixtures, compare it with some of the other 4.5 keepers and their assets and their fixtures, and then see what is the kind of best pairing that you can come up with. I actually think Robert Sanchez from Brighton paired up with Danny Ward is a fantastic pairing. If you also cast your eye to some of the quotes from Brendan Rodgers over here, he does seem to be very, very confident in Ward's ability to actually play as a starting one, and you can see him being very comfortable about Danny Ward's abilities to actually provide coverage within corners and also kind of just demand and occupy space, which was a key, I would say, issue for Leicester last season when they were so poor in the box, especially versus set pieces. And so while Schmeichel is seemingly moving on into Liga, this could be a great opportunity for us to get a 4.0 keeper and really look at maybe saving a little bit of money from our keepers, even though there has been a bit of a price cut to players like Alisson, Ederson, and still go for a 4.5 keeper and go for that rotation without even losing money that people usually would when they kind of do that 4.5 rotation. The next team and the next assets are going to be Rodrigo and Aronson from Leeds. Aronson is a new joiner, and Rodrigo is someone who we have seen moved into the midfield this season. I would say the one detracting thing from Rodrigo from the outset is that he is at 6.0. 6.0 means that he's directly competing with Martinelli for price, and I really don't think you can actually say that Martinelli is a worse asset than Rodrigo. I think Martinelli is probably one of the best price assets in the game. And if you do have someone like Saka and you have someone like Jesus, maybe you don't have the space or the comfortability to move into Martinelli. So it might make sense to go and tempt yourself with someone like Rodrigo, who has had a fantastic preseason. He just scored a hat-trick in the previous match versus Cagliari. So that could be a great opportunity to look at a Leeds asset. What's great about Leeds as well is you finally have Jesse Marsch with a preseason and an opportunity to also incorporate a few key new players into this team, improving the midfield and even improving the defense. I'd still say that the left back position is a little bit suspect, and you still have Stuart Dallas, who hopefully would come back from injury and provide something to this Leeds team somewhere in the mid-season. But Leeds could actually start the season quite hot. I would actually say that they're not really a guarantee to actually keep the clean sheets that we expect them to do. I know Mesle was an interesting option. I even was kind of tempted by Mesle, but just watching their sort of play versus Cagliari, I would say that game was even close to being 3-3 at one point. I really am not super confident in Leeds and their ability to actually keep clean sheets. And instead, I would be actually much more interested in going for some of these offensive players. And as I said, Aronson is going to be that other option that I'm thinking about. Aronson is a 5.5 midfielder, someone who's cheaper than Rodrigo, definitely has less ownership, and he just looked exceptional in terms of his creative playmaking, his ability to drive with the ball. Really reminded me of someone like Ramsey last season, who created these fantastic runs forward to actually look for goal scoring opportunities. But Aronson is definitely much more of a creative player than someone who has that kind of lethal first touch kind of long shot ability. And I would say Aronson looked incredible. If you actually have the chance to see one of Patrick Bamford's goals from the Cagliari match, have a look at his outside the foot pass to Bamford. It really looked fantastic. So I think Aronson is a very interesting creative asset that could actually rival someone like Neto. Neto is definitely more direct, but when you actually compare and contextualize Wolves, I will say that sometimes they have a tendency to play within this back three structure as a very defensive team, and they don't create too many opportunities. Last season, they seemed to be quite interesting from the preseason, but when it actually came down to the Premier League actually starting and Wolves and having a look at Wolves and their performance within the first half of the season, they were very, very quiet when it came to creating chances. Potentially, the Jimenez injury is going to also influence you one way or the other. So think about that too when you're thinking about, let's say, going for Neto, going for Bailey, or even for Alisson right now, who could actually rival those two players who are probably in the forefront of FPL managers' minds. Another option that has looked incredibly exciting at the same price point as Leon Bailey. We talked about how there are a lot of competitors potentially now. Aronson for Neto at 5.5, and now with Bailey, you have someone like Almiron at 5.0. Yes, you have Bruno Guimaraes as well, another Newcastle midfielder that some people would be thinking about for FPL. I would probably, as I said, detract away from him. He's still a box-to-box mid for me. I'm not super interested in what he has to provide from an FPL point of view at this point in time. Almiron for me is also another tough option because when you're looking at these Newcastle players, ultimately 2 out of their first 5 games is going to be versus Liverpool and City, and it's really hard to see myself going for a short-term kind of punt into someone like Almiron, even though he's had a red-hot preseason. I think it just seems a little more comfortable to go for someone like Bailey, who is very smooth, I would say, game weeks 1 to 4, and you can move away from him if he doesn't seem very good or has been dropped by then. Whereas with Almiron, you're already tempting yourself with a very tough game week 3 game. So he really has to perform very, very well in game weeks 1 and 2, especially since the rest of the player population is going to be going into Neto, who could potentially be performing well. And another tough thing I would say with Newcastle is you have other key options too. You've seen St. Maximin and Callum Wilson be incredibly involved. Preseason is also another thing where I would say Wilson is definitely a player I see shine in the real games. St. Maximin as well has an okay preseason. He had a brace the other day, and Almiron has mostly scored within select games. And one thing is small sample size, one thing is just the preseason and Newcastle having plenty of attackers to play from. We could also see them lose clean sheets too. I don't see too much value coming from Newcastle early on. I know people will be interested in Trippier and Pope, but just when we look at fixtures, I think it is actually a little bit tougher for Newcastle than most when we compare it to some of the mid-table teams. So I don't see the full value really going for Almiron, but it's just worth pointing out someone who's had an electric preseason. Definitely one of the standout performers so far. And if you compare it, as I said, to someone like Benrahma last season, who probably no one expected to have such a great start to the season, I mean, Almiron really could be the one if you are someone who is investing in people who are in form and hot. The last asset that I'm going to talk about is Trossard. Yes, it's a Brighton asset, some asset that we probably don't ever really want to talk about or take too much serious consideration of. If you cast your mind back to someone like Mopé in previous seasons, he's always someone who's looked very, very good for the algorithms. He's someone who I think the AI has always said would do well, and that's simply because Brighton have been a very, very competent team for the last few years. Last season was a great result for them, one of their best finishes, and they were actually able to do quite well when it came to, I would say, capitalizing on the expected goal involvement and the creativity that they actually provide within their tactical structure. What's so interesting, I think, is when Leicester moved into this back three, Trossard really, really shone as a player. And you could see that as well. He was another player who got a hat-trick recently versus Espanyol. Espanyol is the side that have recently just promoted back into La Liga after getting demoted around 2 years ago. And what's interesting, I would say, is that Trossard has become the talisman of the team. We have seen many instances where he has been in the past, but I would say Mopé was also someone who shared a large kind of plentiful amount of the XG, whereas now Trossard does seem to be someone who's playing in this false nine role, really relishing that opportunity. And I would say, even though the fixtures on paper look a little bit tough, Brighton have been very, very competent versus teams outside of the top two, and that's just simply teams like City and Liverpool. Outside of that, I think they've gotten really consistent results. If you remember near the end of last season when West Ham were fighting for a top 5, top 6 finish, Brighton was someone who beat them. United also lost to Brighton, and these are the fixtures that they have early on that seem tough, but Brighton could easily have a good opportunity to play and perform well in. Yes, Basuma is a key miss, but I really think Trossard could be a talisman that we're definitely sleeping on as a 6.5 option, and someone who could really shine within this Brighton team, who I would say on paper still are very, very formidable and have a very great manager. And that's going to be it for the preseason video. It was short and sweet. I hope you guys really enjoyed it. Definitely Ward is probably the one takeaway I would recommend you guys leaving this video with. Try to fit him in your team. Have a look at some of the other 4.5 keeper pairings. And that's it. I'll see you guys in the next video. Take care.